guys, and welcome back. Today is technically Sketch Tuesday, and as usual, I pretty much never actually do just sketches. I usually end up doing a finished piece, and today I absolutely wanted to do a nice finished piece in honor of Valentine's Day. I was really excited about doing one that was themed for Valentine's Day and all the concepts that I could do, so when I originally thought about doing a piece for Valentine's Day a while ago, I had a very different concept in mind. Kind of similar to this in some ways, but it was much more gruesome and bloody in my head. But when I actually finish this one, it's a lot cuter, but I don't know. I think that I would have liked it either way. I might have to take my original concept and tweak it and make that one kind of happen eventually. But for today, it did end up a lot sweeter, and I really like that. I like that kind of artwork too. So I like the two sides of having something that's a little bit scarier and more horror based, as well as something that's a little bit softer and cuter. But today I, as usual, have my sketching process where I start off with a thumbnail that I do traditionally, and I show them really quickly at the beginning, and usually I'm using a cool erase pencil that's red right now, and I just sketch something out that works and it has the flow and the movement that I want. And it's easy when you're doing them small because you can very quickly move from one to the next if one isn't working and you're not investing a ton of time. And I notice that's the problem when I work a lot larger on a sketch. A lot of times I will stick with that sketch because I feel like, well, I've got the head or the face right and it took me so long and it's so big. I need to make this sketch work, when sometimes fundamentally the concept of that one isn't as good as it could be. So when I work much smaller, I find that I'm able to move on and start a new one and eventually get to a much better concept rather than being stuck into one. And like usual, after I'm done with that quick thumbnail, I will just take a photo of it and take it into Photoshop and then create a file that's the exact same size as the final version that I'll be working on. And I just do a line over. I draw right on top of it, well, on a layer on top of it, and I fix all of the anatomy problems. I get the details correct. I tweak everything so that it is exactly what I want, and then I scan it off, and then it's really easy to jump right into transferring it onto the final with a light box. And that's what I am using right here. If you haven't heard of those before or you don't have one yet, I highly suggest it. They save you so much hassle and work, and it keeps your papers really nice. I use my light box almost daily, so it is definitely one of my favorite tools that I use. And the pens are Micron pens as usual. I am really falling back in love with these things. I find that I kind of go in phases on what tools I tend to like to use. And I had a huge phase where I was using just bottled ink and brushes, and I loved it, and I will absolutely go back to it. But right now, I'm definitely having like a Micron pen renaissance. I'm enjoying the precision and the control, and I find that I'm able to be a lot more confident when I'm just sitting down doing it. I don't have that nerves of being in the moment where I'm about to put down the line, and I'm not sure if I'm going to get it exactly right or if I'm going to be able to get that same level of curve to it. And when you're using Micron pens, you can build up on it. That's one of the benefits and the drawbacks, because it is a static width of a line. You can just go in there and build it up, build it up, build it up. It does mean that you can't get dynamic lines easily and quickly, but it also means that you have complete control over where the thickness and the thins of the lines happen. And I like that control. And I did several little thumbnails as usual to figure out where I wanted the colors to be. I knew that I wanted this very traditional red to be one of the main colors in this piece. It is actually cadmium red, so it's a very pure, warm red compared to my other reds. And I originally actually had a concept in mind where I wanted to do a black dress, and I had this black glitter that I was going to put on top of the piece so that it had this really cool looking shine and texture. But as I was looking at the colors, it didn't feel like the right option. And I think that's the hardest part for me to be able to realize, is that sometimes what I want to do isn't the best thing for that piece. And that's important to realize and learn to be able to be a better artist, is to learn, well, maybe that hand that I drew and it may be perfect, maybe it's not right. Maybe it's not right for the piece or not in the right position. And learning to let things go that are good or a good idea in way of things that are better for that particular piece is definitely a very important part of being an artist. And I remember a few like critical moments in college, I believe, where I was working on a piece and I did not want to let a certain thing go that was important to me. And then talking to the professor, I mean, it came to the realization that it wasn't the best for that piece. It wasn't what needed to happen for this piece to be the best. It could be something that I can incorporate later or make a new piece for, but in that moment, that was not the right one. And that's a concept that I've been really trying to make sure that I put into everything that I do. And I actually do think I'm pretty successful at being able to move on from the attachment from anything and being able to change that idea and change what I'm drawing and fix it and make it better and not get stuck in just admiring what I did do or feeling this loss from moving on from something that I felt was okay. And that way I have seriously felt myself grow as an artist. And ultimately there were a few small things that made me realize that I didn't want to use the black glitter in this piece. Specifically, I decided that I wanted it to be a red dress rather than a black dress, and I wanted it to be red, and then I wanted this like shawl thing that she's holding to be black. And I felt that the fabric itself of the shawl that she's holding wouldn't really fit well with being glittery and sequined, so I decided not to do that. And I chose the red for the dress because I had these drips coming down from that heart in her chest down onto her dress. And I didn't want to cover those up, and I didn't want them to get lost in the darkness of the dress itself. I felt that that was an important detail to preserve. So that's ultimately, it usually ends up being a few small decisions that help me get to the final decision of where the colors need to be. And a good thing to think about when you're painting, especially with watercolor, because that's what I'm used to, is when you want to shade something, like here where I did her blonde hair, and I wanted to shade it, a great way to think about it in a very dynamic way is to add the complementary color into what you already had mixed for their hair. So here I had this yellowy blonde color, so I mixed in some purple, and you get this really gorgeous gray multi-tonal color where it's not just like flat gray. It has these yellow tones in it as well as the purple, and you can see that. And when I was mixing that together, it was just a really beautiful color on my palette. And once I shaded with it, I really loved the effect of it, where it does have that cool shadow look to it, and it does have that complementary scheme so that it really makes it pop. And since it still has the yellow in it, it also has a harmonious blend with what was already there. So if you want to darken a color, bring in the complementary color, and it will make it very dynamic rather than simply adding like a black to it. It will keep it from getting really grayed out, and it'll keep it very interesting and multi-tonal, and I love that. And one of the very final steps I did was I actually took, it's actually called Golden. Golden is the brand, and it is definitely gold paint. But I took my paint and I put it on the insides of her hearts because that's what I knew it needed to be first. And one of the things that I have a hard time with when I'm using very shiny metallic embellishment type paints like this is that I tend to go a little overboard. I will put it everywhere, and suddenly there's no longer a focal point with those gold paints or those shiny paints, but it's kind of everywhere and it just goes too far. So I'm trying very hard to make sure that I reel myself back in and not let myself put too much of this down just because I love it so much. But I put it down where it needed to be first, inside the hearts, and then I added a few specific embellishment areas. I put some in her flowers and some on the rings in her hands. And I also did make sure that I put it in like the little blood drips that are coming down from the hearts so that it connected with the inside of the heart itself. And the very final step that I did is I just took some white ink and I added a very thin little border around some of her hand and that cloth that's coming forward. I actually really like incorporating this in a way that is kind of abstract, but it does separate the different layers within the piece so that it gives it a little bit of this like artificial depth almost, and I really love that look. So I've been doing that a lot lately. And I end up going back in this morning, which is a little bit later, but I went in and put another white line around the other side of her hip where there's a heart cut out in her hip. I felt that that one wasn't coming forward as much. It wasn't as easily visible as the two on her chest. So I went in with the white ink there just so that it could really sharpen the edge of that heart and you can see it immediately. And that is it for today's video. I really love working on these small scale pieces. They're just really enjoyable to sit down and get a full piece done and quickly, and to be able to enjoy just thinking about the concept and quickly being able to have that satisfaction of getting it done. But as usual, I do have the original available at my shop, so if you want to own her, you can. There's a link down in the description as well as in my end card that'll happen in just a second. And I actually will also have some 5x7 mini prints available at my shop as well, so if you wanted to own the print version of her, you can. And again, I'll have that link, and I'll have a link to all the tools that I used today down in the description. And yeah, that is pretty much it for today. I do post every Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, so if you haven't yet, hit subscribe, and if you haven't hit the button yet, please do. You'll get notifications, and I will see you guys at my next video.